Karen Dobres, thank you very much for joining me today. How are you, first of all?
I am very happy. It's book launch day, and I've just been with the book fairies down at the Dripping Pan, our football ground, and they've been hiding books for people to discover.
Oh, that's lovely. And that's a really exciting way of doing it, isn't it? To kind of engage people and like something a little bit different.
Yeah, I love what they do. It's brilliant. They're free books, and people should pass them on to the next person, when they've read them.
Oh, I love doing that. I'm all for a little book exchange. That's one of my favorite ways to do it.
Yeah.
Before we move on and talk about the book, I think it'd be remiss not to kind of start by talking about that amazing win at the weekend for the Lionesses. I just heard you saying you were there. What was that like?
Unreal. I spent the whole afternoon at the Lionesses HQ, and they'd kind of turned this office area with I can't really describe it, like with a kind of middle bit into a beach. So they had all this sand and all these fountains there, and there were DJs, and there was obviously, drink and food outlets, and we bumped into some, oh God, Missy from Liverpool, who is a lioness. I think she's in the pathway, or she is a lioness. Terrible of me not to know, but she was lovely and took photos with us. And there was Maisie Adams there, the comedian, and it was just to everyone. It was like being at a festival. Everyone was so full of joy, and obviously at that point we didn't know that the lionesses would win, and Spain were the favourites, but. We felt we'd already won because that culture at women's football, which goes from the very top to the very, grassroots clubs, is so inclusive and so fun, and you can talk to everyone and anyone, and they're immediately your friend. So yeah, it was a brilliant, brilliant day.
I want to say that that's maybe what got them through in the end because I don't think anyone could have watched that whole tournament and said that they played their best football because they didn't. And but I
Mm,
think the resilience that they have and that fan base, I think that just kept
yeah.
them going and going and going. And they're such amazing role models, aren't they, for the next generation coming through?
Do you know, Alicia, they keep teaching us these lessons, and they're not always the lessons we expect. And I think one thing really about women, like when I was on the football club board, I was sometimes the only woman on the board, and sometimes there was one or two others, but really we need more women in football. But I think people don't apply, and they don't think that they can do the job because they think they have to be perfect. And once again, the Lionesses have shown us that you can be imperfect, a little bit rubbish at first against France, and you can still progress as long as you keep going and you've got your network, let's say, around you, your allies, your friends, your team, whoever they are. And I think they just keep demonstrating these amazing, really profound lessons to us, young girls, older women like me, to learn from. And honestly, I stand taller every time I watch a women's football match.
I love that. And that's something that I actually speak about quite a lot. And I remember speaking to a charity maybe a couple of months ago where they said that their aim was just to create a space where girls can be bad at football. And I thought that's just such like a powerful thing because you don't have to be the next Beth Mead. Like you might be, but you don't have to be and to enjoy it. And I think that's something that's drilled into girls from quite a young age that you've got to be good and you've got to be the best and otherwise you can't do that thing.
Oh, yeah, I mean it's so hard, isn't it? I mean, we aren't taught to be rejected as girls. Like boys and men are taught to be rejected and go again, and we're not taught to fail. So we have to. I mean, footballers fail every day. They fall down, they get up again. In fact, women ones get up faster, as we know, than men
They
ones.
do.
Yeah. So I mean, it's like we have to just learn. I mean, just how I don't know how to put it, but uncondition ourselves, and football, women's football is a great way for women to learn to be maybe to be accepted in an environment that they wouldn't normally be accepted in, and accepted to be a different way as a woman and still be valid.
Absolutely. And it kind of ties into everything that you've spoken about in your book, but I was quite emotional watching that win because I thought this is actually bigger than football. For me, it's about
Mm.
changing society and it's a societal shift. They've not only gone and won it once, they've retained it and they're showing that, you know, women and women's football is just as powerful and just as important as the men's game. So
Well,
talk to me.
I'd go one step further. I think it's more powerful
Yes.
because of what you said. Like, yes, we can enjoy a great game of football, but the meaning and the purpose of women's football is, in my opinion, in my humble opinion, greater than the meaning and purpose of men's football, because men's football goes with those stereotypes and women's football crashes against them and tries to it doesn't, it's not setting out to change the world or change culture, but it does just by being. So I think in that sense it's more meaningful.
I would absolutely agree with you. I couldn't have put it better myself. Talk to me a little bit about your book, about what people can expect from it, and about the ways in which you've been changing the landscape of what has been traditionally, a male-dominated space.
Well, I mean, so my book is called Pitch Invasion, or if you look at the title, it's kind of got that lipstick under the P, which makes it Bitch Invasion, which is kind of an ironic joke, which I think is sometimes how it can feel to some men, and certainly, a response that I've had. Um, but yeah, so my book is about the fact that I never liked football, and yet absurdly, I became the director of a football club. So it's kind of about the juxtapositioning of someone who came from a background in fashion and then in therapy, and then came into the male-dominated area of football, not knowing really the accepted culture and the norms. And there were many culture clashes that are detailed in the book. But I came in via gender equality, which is unusual because I expect most people come into football because they've been fans of the game. So I'd never liked football, but it was men's football that I'd never liked. And I thought that that was all football. I didn't know that women played football until 2016-17, when Lewes FC became pioneers in the game by paying the women the same as the men, multiplying the women's budget by 10 times in order to pay them the same as the men and resource them the same, give them the same marketing and everything, like just making them valued equally. Um, and so when I found out about this, I live 15 minutes walk from the ground, and I thought, well, go and watch a match. So I watched a women's match, and it was like a really a profound experience for me. I'd never seen women behaving in that way. I'd never seen women so strong and aggressive and shouting and powerful, teamwork, all the amazing leadership skills that women footballers learn through football, and indeed anyone can learn through football. And I just thought, well, see that there was a criticism of the equality campaign at Lewes, which was the women don't deserve to be paid the same as the men because they don't get the same crowds. But knowing myself, I hadn't even known about women's football. I thought there must be so many more what I called unwelcome women that don't know about this going on. And if they knew, they would come and watch it because it's amazing. I didn't know the rules, but I thought this is amazing, right? So and also I found out about the ban on women's football, so I understood why I had thought it was only boys and men that football was for. And I was angry about that, and it motivated me to go and tell women's groups. I made lists of women's groups and asked them to come in solidarity with the cause for gender equality, even if they didn't like football. So my market was women who didn't like football. And we quadrupled the gate in 2 seasons there for the women. The men's gate rose too, so very important. The men didn't lose out, and the buzz created by Equality FC made headlines, everywhere. We didn't have a media or marketing team, but we dealt with it. We were in every country, and it was amazing. And and yeah, that's how I got involved. I kind of dedicated a lot of time to it because I got angrier and angrier the more I found out, the more I spoke to players about how they were treated or had been treated. And yeah, I just made it. I was also going into menopause. That makes you angry, by the way. And I was just fired up to really change the world. And eventually got elected to the board. Lots of fun there, and challenges. And then, yeah, so I decided to write my story when I stepped down because I felt, I wanted to tell it in my own way and that it was an interesting story that men and women might learn from. I really want women who don't like football to pick up the book.
I think that's a really powerful message, and I'd just like to speak to you a little bit about what it was like being in those rooms on the board, being in those rooms and often being maybe, sometimes the only woman or one of, a couple. Um, what was that like? Did you ever kind of question, why am I here? Or, feel like you didn't belong there at all?
Yes. Yes, I felt sometimes like I was, well, I didn't feel like I was. I knew I was an imposter. So it wasn't imposter syndrome. It was like being an imposter without a syndrome. But if you're thinking about trying to create gender equality in one of the most male bastions of the world, it's the most difficult job to do. I expected pushback. I expected it to be hard. I expected it to be tiring and emotional sometimes. It was all those things. And I think if you've got those expectations, then you can be ready for it, and it's not going to be easy. I mean, I think there's a limit to what you can do. I did one term on the board, that's 3 years, and that was enough for me because it can be triggering. It can be that you have to explain so much. You can be ignored, and these are really nice people, by the way, that I'm talking about. These are my colleagues on the board, a lot of them men, but everyone was doing their bit, pulling their weight, but trying to bring in the angle of gender equality, bring in the women, bring that in every time is hard because football's norms are very male dominated and sexist. And so you're trying to undo a system which is so deeply embedded in men and male behavior and putting men first that yeah, it's very difficult. And I was and very enjoyable and very motivated me so much. Brilliant place to do it. But yeah, I was definitely didn't. I felt like I didn't belong. I felt like an imposter. I felt like an outsider. But I used that because I knew there were so many more outsiders to bring in. And if I could like think how I felt and then make changes that would make me feel like I belonged more, then those other people, women and men that had been put off football for various reasons, it would make them feel at home if I could make those changes.
I think that's probably the biggest battle, isn't it? Those like entrenched beliefs that this is a man's game and this is a man's world and all of that um that make it so hard to sometimes break into that space. Like even after the Lionesses win, actually, I don't know if you've seen going around online, but there was a caller on LBC who he called up and he said, I can't stand women's football. I hate women's football. I will turn off if a woman is on TV. And then he went on to say that even if there was a woman on the commentary panel of the men's game, he didn't like that either. He literally said, if I hear a woman's voice, I don't want to listen to it. And I thought, well, you're not actually listening to what they say or if there's any insight there or, what they're bringing to the table. You just, if there's a woman's voice on the panel, you don't want to listen to it. And that's kind of half the battle, isn't it? Getting someone to actually, well, getting people to actually listen that believe that this is like a men's game.
I mean, yeah, I mean, someone like that that's quite extreme, it's very difficult, isn't it? You're really you're up against a lot, and I think that's a very closed mind, and a shame. I feel sorry for that guy, I really do. I mean, that's quite extreme. It's like Joey Barton or something, but I think that a lot of men aren't like that. I think we have to maintain hope and believe that. And I know that in 2020. Two, we had an independent survey done at Lewes FC, and 73% of the fans of our men's team said that they think about gender equality now more than they did 5 years prior, which was when we introduced Lewes FC, gender equality at Lewes FC. So I think, that there's hope that if you can talk about these things and spark these conversations within football, that lots more men will start to appreciate a different kind of a norm than they've had to date. Certainly, we've seen it at Lewes. We're guinea pigs in a way, but we've certainly seen, we had an evening called the Offside Rule and all that jazz, where people new to football could come and ask women players, any question they like, no judgment. And we had a session on menstruation and checking your menstrual cycle and what you should eat as a player, when you should carb up, when you should recover, when you should rest. And there were a couple of men there, and they said they'd never had this opportunity to talk about periods before. They were in their 60s, and they'd never had the chance to talk to women about that, and that they were so grateful for it. I mean, there are lots of men that have been sort of excluded in a way from women as well. And I think that football is such a genius place to speak to men.
It absolutely is. I couldn't agree more. And And I just wanted to end by asking you what you think kind of, I guess, the big clubs that we see in, the Premier League or the Women's WSL, what can they do to follow in Lewis's footsteps and implement gender equality across the men and women's game at any club, really? What are like your top tips?
Well, I mentioned a couple on the radio just now, actually, because people often say, well, it's all very well for a small club like Lewes to pay the women the same as the men, but what's Manchester United going to do, because they pay the men so much more. And I think the thing is, it's not really about pay is a bit of a kind of a red herring. It's more about how you value women and what your intentions are towards the women's game. So, how can you show women on the pitch and off the pitch and potential new fans that might come through the door and pay lots of money for your merch and your beer and your wine or whatever, how might you show them that they're equally worthy of being in your stadium and equally, that you're looking to them as much as you're looking to men? Well, you might not use default male social media handles, for example. You might not say Manchester United women and Manchester United. You might say Manchester United men and Manchester United women. You might look at your website and see whereabouts it is that you're listing the women's fixtures or where you talk about your women's team. Is it second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh priority? Or is it before the under 18s boys? Could it possibly in some utopian world be before the men's team? You know, these are things that you can do for free. But there are other things like, do your women play on the same pitch as the men regularly? Do they have equal access to that pitch where the home fans come already? How are you marketing your women? Where do your posters go? Are your posters based on men's teams posters? Or are they specific to the women's teams market? And we do find in football, as you probably know, that fans of the women's game are much more, tech savvy, loyal. They love the players. They love stories of the players. They love buying merch. Are you thinking about that when you're marketing, or are you just replicating things from the men's game, which is just it's very short-sighted, and it also shows a profound misunderstanding of the women's product.
Absolutely. Well, hopefully in the next couple of years we can see some of those changes being implemented at other clubs. So I'd absolutely love that. And I think, when you said um, that some people compare the men and women's game, I just think you can't do that. It's a completely different beast. It has a completely different fan base and a completely different kind of feel to it, as we've touched on.
Mm,
And hopefully I would love to see those equalities coming into other clubs and other clubs like adopting those
mm,
principles as well.
mm. I think so. I think it's great if you can treat your women's team completely differently to the men's. And some people misunderstand equality. It's not about being the same as, it's really about giving people the same opportunity within the context in which they find themselves. So, like, women's football is a completely different context to men's. It's so obvious, really, but we have to say it because people say, oh, it's just, we just treat it the same as the men's in terms of rights, in terms of broadcasting, in terms of sponsorships. It's really different. And if we treated it as it should be treated, I really think I'm going to say it has the potential to be bigger than the men's game. And I know I'm saying a big thing, but I think it really, really does. I'm so hopeful for women's football in these, with the younger generation, especially who are very values driven, purpose led. I think there's a big, big market coming up for the women's game.
Oh, I can't wait to see where it goes because I couldn't agree with you more. I think this it's especially with what the Lionesses have just done as well, growing that kind of to a new audience. And I just think, yeah, hopefully in the next couple of years we'll see some big changes. But Karen, thank you so much for speaking to me today.
It's been a
Hopefully
pleasure.